Open our class with prayer, please.
Dear God, thank you for this beautiful day that you've given us, and thank you for the rain that you sent our way back a few weeks ago, tearing out the grasses again. Dear Lord, we have a lot of people that are amongst tonight. Please be with your sweet servant Julie and her family as they struggle with this challenge that they're facing. We have many others that are sick. Please be with Jenny and Karen as they're recovering from their illnesses and injuries. We also have a lot to be thankful for from you, dear God. Thank you for the beautiful meeting you and Sister Abbott Helen, and for Kayla and Morgan as they come into the covenant of marriage together. Dear God, just please be with us as we go through our week. Help us to remember all the people that we care about so much. Please help us this next week as we go into our gospel meeting, that it will be successful and that we can share the joy of the blessings that we share in you.
Amen. Thank you. We're on the bottom of page 5. And the most of tonight's lesson is just about our feelings or what we should or shouldn't do. And I want to emphasize the fact that this whole book is on the hurting of people, which is a feeling. This is all about grief and about how we suffer. And I'll tell you, we are completely alike in that every one of us has something. There's not a one of us that doesn't have something. And most of it is covered in these discussion questions. The difference is every one of us handles it differently. And what might be for one person is not going to be good for someone else. And so the difference, we have to try to determine how to approach those that are grieving. It is a whole lot better, this is my opinion, a whole lot better to say nothing than to say something wrong. And I think, of course I'm a political being, but I think of some of the criticism that was of Joe Biden was that no matter what the situation of families that were losing military men, was for him to, rather than focus on their loss, he didn't say 2 words without turning it and saying, I know how you feel. I lost my son. And it was all about me. That's something we are never to be guilty of. Because there is no measurement of you losing a great uncle to my losing a mother. There is no comparison to someone who has lost a relative, even a sister or someone close enough to that as to someone losing a husband or someone losing a child. So there's no real comparison to say, I know exactly how you feel, or I know how you feel. And this brings this up. It says, never tell someone you understand what they're going through unless you do. When Amy lost John, she and I talked, But there was a major difference even there, because it had been 28 years since I'd lost my husband, so I didn't know how it was with her, and we grieved differently. So don't ever make the mistake of saying, I know how you feel. Because no, you don't know how you feel. You can say, I have been in, I have lost, but not compare it to their loss. You know? But how many of us know what to say? What do you suggest to be said?
One thing I'll say that if that person knows how you feel, you know it. I remember, I don't remember much, but I remember looking up at Dawn's visitation and seeing Debbie Payne. There was an instant connection because she knew exactly what I was feeling. And she came there for me. She never, I don't know what she said. I don't know. But she was there for me. You know, and I knew it because
Yeah, she had
just lost her husband.
Right,
Not long
right.
before.
But
One thing that I remember my sister-in-law saying is the going through loss helped her be more gracious, because she said so many people try to be comforting and it's not. But thankfully she had the wherewithal to recognize and appreciate that they were trying. And she said, I really had to train myself to not get offended when people say things that aren't tasteful, because at least they're trying.
and a lot of people do feel that, but then I have heard many say about being offended about something that someone said, and I thought the same thing, they were trying, you know? But at the same time, this grief thing, we all handle it differently. And we may, there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. There's 12 of us in here, and there may be 6 of the 12 or 5 of the 12 or something who deal with or have dealt with a child being out of duty. But I'll guarantee you, you don't know how I felt, and I don't know how you felt. Because every situation is different. But this is what I do know. God knows. And if you turn, we are to turn to one another for comfort. That's part of God's family. The reason that He put us together was for us to be able to comfort and encourage and to build up one another. Whether it be in the worship service, or whether it be in grief, or whether it be in joy, it is for us to be for one another. That is the purpose. But what I do know for sure, God knows how you feel. God knows how to comfort you. And if you're turning anywhere else for comfort, you're turning the wrong page. Because I want you to think for a minute. How many times the Bible shows the compassion of God in Christ? I want you to think back in the Old Testament. I think of when I was so angry at Jonah when I was reading that. And yet God made him shave. God gave him some compassion. He took it, but He gave it. I'm thinking of the widow who had the son, died, and she went to Elijah. And Elijah brought by God's grace that son back to life. I think of Jesus when he came into the town, and the group was carrying the widow to bury her only son, and Jesus resurrected him and gave him back to his mother. I think of when Lazarus died, Jesus wept with Mary. God knows. I think of Hannah, and I think of how she grieved for a child. I think of the compassion that God had. But the main thing is, that's the only place that we can have comfort, and to blame the only comforter, to shift an anger to God over loss, is blaming the only source of true comfort when we have our loss. So, never try to answer why. What do you think that means? Amy, what do you think that means?
Well, Job never knew why. And if God didn't tell Job why, then we don't get to make up why something happened. Even if we think we're comforting somebody, we don't know why. And so we don't need to make up things. And I get so tired of hearing at funerals, oh, they're rounding up sheep in heaven. God needed another, we don't need to do that, to project ourselves into God's place.
Into making the decision
Yes.
of what God is doing. That is correct. Joy? Comment?
I mentioned to you last week about we lost a classmate from high school class. This discussion about there were two of them that they were having tea parties in heaven. Well,
Did y'all hear that? Tea parties in heaven.
so it has just gotten worse and worse. And I've just backed out of that whole conversation. But one of the other girls sent me a text, and she said, I kept waiting for you
To make a comment?
to say something about these tea parties in heaven. I have searched the scriptures, I cannot find a tea party in heaven.
Well,
And we put those worldly things, well, he's roping cows, or he's doing this, or he's doing that. And I told her what we need to be thinking is that they are, if they're in heaven, the glory of being with God, which is what we all want.
and what our loved ones that have passed want for us. Be assured, if anyone has lost someone who is not in a covenant relationship with God, has a greater sorrow than any that do. But at the same time, we have to go and read again and again that if they are lost, they don't want you to be. The last thing they want is for you to be. And the story of the rich man and Lazarus accentuates that fact. That's not what they want. That's not what they want. And so I will tell you, what I came up with on that. Regardless if it's a death, if it's a loss, whatever our grief is about, we can only see the here and the now. That's all we can see. We can see yesterday, and we can see to this moment. But we cannot accurately see another step past here and now. And for us to try to project what God is doing is a big mistake. Because God can see yesterday, today, tomorrow, next year, and eternity. And when God says that everything works to good for those that love the Lord, you be assured that there is some reason that only God knows what good that will bring about. And there are many times that we have a loss or a grief or something, and it may be 20 years later, and you look back and you think, if that tragedy had not happened, I would not be who and what and where I am today. And so that, to me, the fact that God can see from now through eternity, and we can only see now, to me, that is the answer. They're trying to answer why. Why? We might can say, well, this happened and that's the reason this happened. Maybe, maybe not. We don't see the result of it. We don't see what good comes from what we are. There's some singer, and I don't like him, so I'm not sure who it is. But he has this song that said, "Thank God for unanswered prayers." That this girl he was so in love with, and he sees her now, and he is so glad that God didn't answer that prayer. Well, there are events in our lives that are exactly the same way, that something we thought was the best thing in the world turned out not to be at all. All right, Katrina.
I'm teaching Jesus Raising Lazarus from the Dead to the pre-K and through first graders tonight. And as I was preparing my lesson, one of the activities that it suggested doing fits right into this because, Jesus waited before he went. And people were like, why are you waiting? And it said, get a picture that's pretty intricate, and then get a plain piece of paper and punch one hole in it. And show the kids the picture or not the picture, but show them the paper with the hole punched, and you can only see this much of the picture behind it. And that's what we can see. We can see this much of the picture, but God can see the whole thing. We have no idea what the picture is when we can just see a tiny little hole punch of it. But God knows the whole picture. He understands it all.
Absolutely.
I thought that was a really cool idea because I'm like, oh, that helps me as an adult.
As an adult, wrap our minds around it.
I also had a friend get diagnosed with cancer, and she said that for the first 2 weeks she thought, why me? I'm 36 years old, why me? And then a shift in her thinking, she thought, why not? Exactly. I'm not any more special than anybody else who has experienced tragedy or cancer or whatever. And she said, why not me? And it, like that little shift changed, because it's not her place to know why.
I think of Jim and Anita and Justin and Amanda. And I don't know how many would see that as an absolute tragedy. But there is no reckoning of the influence that that child has had on thousands of people that have seen compassion and donated to help with that, and seen how that can come together. She had a 4th birthday this week. And, I'm sorry? 5th birthday this week. And they thought she wouldn't live 4 days, so.
Well, I think another thing too, off of what you said, is sometimes we see deaths and they can be as senseless because, or any kind of grieving, time and chance happen to all men. And what we have to do, how can we make it good? If there's good to be had, let's try to focus.
Try to find the good that is in it. Discussion questions prompting additional insights. He says each week, our first day, our Sunday worships, are filled with hurting people. I compiled a list recently of those in the pew whose hurts are known. I'm guessing similar people sat in the pew near you. The first one is parents burdened because of prodigal children. We've already discussed that a little. But I'll tell you, the only thing we can do is teach and pray. If, and I've seen this happen, I've probably done this, what do I mean? I've seen it happen. You try to guilt them into going. Well, if they're going because you're guilting them. Anyway, this is a real grief to see your children make decisions that, according to your knowledge and understanding of the Bible, is going to result in the loss of their soul. It is a grief. Any comments on that?
I have found, not that it helps anything right this minute, but I have found telling those children that I pray for them every day, and they know the truth. They've been taught the truth, they know the truth. The truth will not leave them alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm that innocent.
And you make sure it does. The second one is grandparents raising grandchildren. And we see more of this now than we have ever seen before, I think. I don't know what was in the ancient past. But children who go so far off the rails that grandparents are left raising grandchildren. And how fortunate for the grandchildren that they have grandparents that care. And I will tell y'all, and since nobody will know who this is, except y'all, it won't make any difference. Sylvia, home, family, friends, little piddling job, happiest of heart in Sweetwater. Here now, day and night raising these kids, and literally doing it by herself, because she's only home on the weekends and not every weekend. That certainly wasn't the life that she planned. And I'll tell you, I hurt for her and people like her. Because when we get to that age, we want to sit in our recliner if that's what we want to do. Not running kids back and forth every, you know what that's like. It's a constant So that is another, really a grief to many. And in fact, I think she called Chris one time, and she was kind of upset about what one of them had done, and she said, and you know, Chris, every day it gets closer to me just going to my own house and locking the door. He said, oh, Mama, you can't do that. I'll be home this weekend. Caregivers wondering if anyone understands. And I answered that by saying, no, we don't. We do not understand. And I have found in every family, there's one or two that are going to be there, and the rest fled in and out, or not at all, or whatever. I remember when my mother was bedfast for 6.5 years, and my brothers would call and say, hey sis, this week is Mother's birthday, pick up something, put my name on it, and just tell me what. Christmas is coming, sis, get her something nice, and just tell me what you spend. And I did it every time, not for them, but for her, because she never knew that I did it. I never told her that they would do this. I'm just saying, I was the only girl. And so, 5 brothers, so I know that routine too. But I'm gonna tell you the biggest danger there is this week, well, all up to me, I'm just all alone, and nobody cares, and nobody helps. Well, that's as bad as not doing it, or worse. To build resentment and anger, I can honestly say that instead of that, it was my privilege to do it. I did it with joy, not with dread. And sometimes I think that our children see that. And there's not anybody in this building that's well taken care of as I am. I mean, sometimes I feel guilty about being so spoiled.
Well, it really is all the attitude you bring toward it, because just in the past 2 weeks, I talked to somebody who said, oh yeah, my dad had back surgery, so we get to go spend the week with them to be able to help out. And then I talked to someone else on the phone who said, oh, his caregiver is going to be gone for the week, and I'm afraid she's going to call us and want us out there every day.
Exactly.
So it's just the attitude.
The attitude, the how you approach it, the attitude is everything. I don't know of anyone we have in this congregation, but I don't know a wife whose husband has deserted her.
Unless that's your season.
Well, and by then the wife was twice ready to go, so what are you talking about? Yeah, but it's a lot more common than it
He
ever
didn't
was.
get very far chasing me back.
I'm sorry?
I said, he didn't get very far chasing me back.
Well, and those two go together. The wife whose husband deserted her and single parents facing double duty.
Yes, that's definitely true. Yeah, now more than ever. And I am sure that your ladies would be shocked at the problem in our country with the addiction to pornography. You would be shocked. Because I was in the business, not the porno business. But I cannot tell you how shocked I was, and that some of the people that were seeking help. Are you kidding me?
And think about all the people that don't seek help because they don't think it's a problem.
Exactly. Nothing wrong. I'm not doing
It is a
anything.
problem, but it's more accessible now than what it was 50
Oh.
years ago.
And the only, to my knowledge, the only serious law against it is if it's child pornography. And then, so I'll just tell you all this too. In the United States of America, when I hear on the news that they have lost 30-some-odd thousand immigrant children, that they have no idea where they are, I'll guarantee you where they are. That is a bad thing. A Christian fighting an addiction to alcohol or other drugs. This too is a lot more common than we think. And this all goes to the fact that this is hidden until they're caught. It's hidden. And this drug thing is so when I officed in Abilene, that was a big agency. And I'm going to tell you, we had the state, the juvenile, the federal, those that were on probation or parole, that we saw for drug and alcohol addiction, kept the business every therapist failed. There was a waiting list a mile long for Serenity House to get them into treatment. It is and then I do not understand it. They want to legalize it even more. It blows my mind.
Well, there's some conversation going on. You know, some companies, some state, they require drug testing as part of their employment. And this article that came through the restaurant was talking about that more businesses are going that direction because they don't want people that are under the influence of drugs working,
On jobs that
On jobs.
affect people, and
one of the questions was, why do you think a restaurant would need that? I know why a restaurant would need that, but
I do too. I do too. A couple hoping for a child, only to be disappointed again. And I know this is a grief for many. But again, I am saying that God is where the answer is. A war veteran, and I'm going to go through these quickly because we all know someone or at least acquainted with someone who deals with these things. A loved one facing cancer, parents who have buried a child, widows who sit down daily as one at a table for two, a woman on the receiving end of domestic violence, and that can be verbal or physical or emotional. A step-parent always on the outside looking in, a family of special needs child, a couple who visits their son in prison, and a couple who's learned their son is a homosexual. And I'm telling you that we either know or have known someone in all of those categories. Someone said, preaching to hurting hearts because there's one in every pew. That's not exactly true. We must preach to hurting hearts because there's more than one in every pew. In fact, the pews are filled with them. Why do you think we tend to mask our tears? Why do you think we're afraid to get real with one another? Do you identify with any of these scenarios or know those who do? What can other Christians do to be of comfort and help? Well, I have said this in this class every time I've taught this class. One of the things that concerns me greatly is that in many cases we hesitate to turn to one another because tomorrow it will be in the headlines of the bulletin. We need to learn to keep our mouth shut about other people's problems so that we can come to one another without fear of it being discussed throughout the congregation. If we want it discussed throughout the congregation, we'd put it in the bulletin. So I'm just saying that's something we need to work on. Everyone has a story. Laura, what do you think that means?
I mean, everybody has a different path on life that they're living, so everybody's day to day and everybody's struggles that they're going through is different from the person sitting beside them, no matter how close they are, even, spouse, husband, and wife.
And that everyone has a problem that they're dealing with. Everyone has a story. Why is faith essential when life gets hard? And what do trials reveal about your faith? Betty Lou, what do you think?
But you know it's being handled when you don't think you can. And trials test the strength of your faith.
And trials test the strength of your faith. Where you turn. And I'm going to tell you, somebody, and I might be guilty of this sometimes, that tries to solve everybody's problems. Well, I'm not the solver. Go to where the solution is.
I put Psalms 18, 31 and 32, for who is God except the Lord? And who is a rock except our God? It is God who arms me with strength.
Absolutely.
What was that verse again?
Psalms 18, 31 and 32.
I think it can even push us into a deeper level of our faith and relationship with God, because I remember, I know I've said this in here before, but when we were in the hospital with Grady, and I said, what if he doesn't get better? And Andy said, we were in the bathroom, and he said, you have to have faith that God's in control. And I said, I know he's in control, 100%. I have faith in that. I'm scared of what his answers, because he will answer it one way or the other. And he said, we'll have to deal with that, and that comes. And so that, I'll never forget that, because it strengthened my, no matter what, you have to keep that faith and that assurance that God's in control.
Yeah, I remember another young woman that was worried war, and she was doing some of that one time. And her husband said to her, well, if it happened, he would be in heaven with God. It'd be our loss, but it'd be his gain. So we grapple
Was
with
it
those
that
things.
friendly? That's so sweet of you, though.
Some try to bargain with God. If you'll do this and if you'll do that, and if you'll do this, I'll do that. We can't bargain with God. But at the same time, God hears us because think of when Hezekiah, they came and told him, set your house in order because you're going to die. And he turned his face to the wall and he prayed earnestly to God. And God stopped the prophet and said, go back and tell him, I hear your prayers. 15 more years. God knows, don't argue with God, but you can pray to God.
What about Hannah? Because I feel like she kind of bargained with God. She said, if you give me a child, I will dedicate him to you and grant him.
And it almost sounds that way, except remember, I think that it was if you give me a son. I think Eli had already, the priest had already told her, go your way, God will answer your prayer. And it was after that that she said, if you give me a son, I will return him to you. And
Is there a
so,
difference in bargaining with God and vowing?
I think yes, because we vow that we will do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But then Abraham also was like, what if there's 15?
Yeah.
What if there's 10? Well, what if there's 5?
But that was a plea to God
Yes.
rather than a bargain with
That's
God, because Abraham wasn't going to give anything in return.
True.
Yeah, both people have to have control in the.
Yeah, and we have no control.
Yeah.
I saw,
All right,
I
and
saw a bumper sticker. You can't bargain with God, but God can bargain with you. Obey His will. And I thought,
and you will have it. All right, and the last one was, what has helped you the most when you walk through the valley of the shadows of life? And I put prayer, hope, and the love of other Christians, and we're out of time, and you know how